There exists no more perfect illustration of the American working class's capacity for self-immolation than the spectacle of coal miners sporting MAGA hats, while their union-busting overlords dismantle the very organizations that once prevented their grandfathers from dying of black lung at 40. This tragic pantomime, workers genuflecting before the altar of their own exploitation, represents the culmination of a 40-year propaganda campaign so successful that its victims now mistake their chains for jewelry. The numbers tell a story of systematic demolition. In 1983, 20% of American workers belonged to unions. Today, that figure has collapsed to a pathetic 10%, with private sector membership languishing at 6%, a level not seen since the Gilded Age, when children lost fingers in textile mills and workers were shot for requesting an 8-hour day. This isn't decline, it's orchestrated annihilation. Consider the sadistic precision with which Amazon, that great monument to late-stage capitalism's sociopathy, conducts its anti-union operations. The company spent $4.3 million on union-busting consultants in 2021 alone, deploying an army of psychological mercenaries to terrorize warehouse workers, earning $15 an hour. When workers at an Alabama facility dared suggest they might prefer not to urinate in bottles during their shifts, Amazon subjected them to mandatory captive audience meetings, Orwellian struggle sessions where consultants explained that unions would somehow make their already miserable conditions worse. The company's internal documents, leaked to the press, revealed executives tracking labor organizing threats, with the vigilance typically reserved for terrorist cells. The Republican Party, that great defender of traditional values, has revealed its only tradition to be the enthusiastic filleting of corporate power. Their 2017 crowning achievement, ramming through right-to-work legislation in Missouri, Kentucky, and West Virginia, represents linguistic perversion worthy of Goebbels. Right to work, that masterpiece of Orwellian nomenclature, actually means the right to freeload off union negotiations while undermining collective bargaining power. It's rather like calling starvation the right to diet. Scott Walker's Wisconsin Putsch of 2011 demonstrated the GOP's methodology with crystalline clarity. Under the pretense of fiscal responsibility, always the refuge of scoundrels attacking the working class, Walker eviscerated public sector unions, stripping them of collective bargaining rights while exempting police and firefighters who'd endorsed his campaign. The result? Wisconsin teachers saw their take-home pay drop by $6,500 annually, while Walker's corporate sponsors received $2.3 billion in tax cuts. The arithmetic of class warfare rarely presents itself with such naked transparency. The Supreme Court's Janus decision of 2018, delivered by the same conservative majority that believes corporations possess religious consciences, dealt another crushing blow to public sector unions, ruling that workers couldn't be required to pay fees to unions that represented them. Justice Alito's majority opinion, a masterwork of judicial prostitution, essentially argued that money equals speech, but only when it flows upward. The decision cost unions $35 million in annual revenue within months, precisely as its corporate architects intended. Meanwhile, the same Republicans who weep tears over cancel culture when a racist loses their Twitter account champion at will employment laws that allow bosses to fire workers for any reason or no reason at all. In 49 states, your employer can terminate you for your political views, your Facebook posts, or simply because they dislike your face, unless you're protected by one of those terrible, horrible, no-good unions that Republicans insist are destroying America. The Fuyao glass factory in Ohio, immortalized in the documentary American Factory, provides a perfect microcosm of modern union-busting techniques. When workers attempted to organize in 2017, the Chinese-owned company hired Labor Relations Institute, a union-busting firm that charges $350 per hour to teach managers how to terrify their employees legally. Workers were subjected to daily harangues about union corruption, shown videos of closed factories, and told explicitly that unionization would mean job losses. The company spent over $1 million to defeat a union that would have cost them far less in wage increases. The principle mattered more than the money, the principle that workers must never, ever be allowed to taste power. The gig economy, that great innovation of Silicon Valley sociopaths, represents capitalism's latest assault on collective bargaining. Uber spent $200 million in California alone to pass Proposition 22, which exempted them from treating drivers as employees deserving of basic protections. They marketed this assault on workers' rights as flexibility and independence, rather like marketing slavery as free room and board. The drivers who believed this propaganda now enjoy the flexibility to work 70-hour weeks without health insurance, the independence to wear adult diapers because they can't afford bathroom breaks. Yet history suggests that capital's current triumphalism may be premature. The same conditions that produced the original labor movement, grotesque inequality, systematic exploitation, and the manifest failure of electoral politics to address workers' concerns, are rapidly reassembling. Amazon workers in Staten Island succeeded in forming the company's first American union in 2022, despite the company's scorched earth resistance. Starbucks workers have unionized over 360 stores since 2021, creating a momentum that even Howard Schultz's union-busting tantrums cannot entirely suppress. The tactics that work haven't changed because power's vulnerabilities haven't changed. The strike remains labor's nuclear weapon. The UAW's 2023 stand-up strikes against the big three automakers secured wage increases of 25% and cost the companies $3.6 billion. When 48,000 University of California academic workers struck in 2022, they paralyzed the state's prestigious university system and won wage increases of up to 80% for the lowest paid workers. Power concedes nothing without demand, and demands without strikes are merely suggestions. The resurgence of wildcat strikes, those beautiful, spontaneous eruptions of worker fury that bypass sclerotic union bureaucracies, offers particular hope. The 2018 West Virginia teachers' strike, technically illegal under state law, inspired similar actions in Oklahoma, Kentucky, and Arizona. These teachers, many of them Trump voters who'd previously viewed unions with suspicion, discovered that solidarity trumps ideology when you can't afford both gasoline and groceries on a teacher's salary. Worker cooperatives provide another avenue of resistance. The Evergreen Cooperatives in Cleveland, a network of worker-owned businesses, have created hundreds of jobs while keeping wealth in communities that capital abandoned decades ago. These enterprises prove that workers can manage themselves perfectly well without parasitic management layers extracting surplus value. The Mondragon Corporation in Spain, a federation of worker cooperatives employing 81,000 people, demonstrates this model's scalability. Their pay ratio between highest and lowest earners is 6-to-1, compared to the 351-to-1 ratio in American corporations, a differential that reveals precisely who the real job creators are. The recent explosion of labor organizing among graduate students, adjunct professors, video game developers, and journalists, previously considered too privileged or precarious to organize, suggests that class consciousness may finally be penetrating the thick skull of American exceptionalism. When even privileged workers recognize they're being proletarianized, capital's divide and conquer strategy begins to fracture. The solution isn't complicated, merely difficult. It requires what it has always required: solidarity, militancy, and the recognition that workers create all value while owners merely extract it. It requires understanding that the boss who tells you unions are unnecessary is rather like the wolf explaining that shepherds cause all the problems. It requires recognizing that every freedom workers enjoy, weekends, overtime pay, workplace safety standards, was purchased with the blood of union organizers who were beaten, blacklisted, and murdered for the crime of suggesting that humans deserve dignity. The path forward demands both electoral and direct action. Support politicians who support unions, but never trust them entirely. Power corrupts, and even the most progressive politician will sell out workers when capital applies sufficient pressure. Join unions where they exist, create them where they don't, and support them everywhere. Refuse to cross picket lines, even virtual ones. Boycott union busters with the fervor that conservatives reserve for companies that acknowledge gay people exist. Most critically, we must recognize that the current system isn't broken, it's functioning exactly as designed. A system that allows 8 men to own as much wealth as half the planet's population isn't experiencing a malfunction. It's achieving its intended purpose. The question isn't whether this system can be reformed, but whether enough people will recognize their common interest in destroying it before it destroys them. The American labor movement isn't dead, merely dormant. Like a volcano that capital mistakenly assumes extinct, the pressure builds daily as inequality reaches levels that would embarrass French aristocrats. When it erupts, and history suggests it will, Those who spent decades explaining why workers don't deserve living wages may discover that workers have surprisingly good memories and remarkably little patience for their former tormentors' sudden conversions to populism. The choice, as ever, is simple: solidarity or serfdom. The fact that so many Americans have chosen serfdom doesn't make it inevitable, merely tragic. But tragedy, unlike farce, at least offers the possibility of catharsis. And catharsis, in this context, looks rather like a general strike.